Well, standing in the pulpit for the first time in almost 5 months, having been on sabbatical, I feel the first appropriate thing to say to the congregation is thank you. The sabbaticals that you so generously offer to the ministers of this church make it possible for us to come back into this work as a long career and not a short job. We are grateful for the opportunity, and I learned so much while I was away about the explicit areas of study I had, but really importantly about how I understand myself in this role, in this place, and who I want to continue growing to be here. And I will talk about that explicitly in a couple of weeks. Today is Theme Sunday. I've come back into the church on the regular Theme Sunday in which the church is on one page together, where the children and adults are thinking similar things. And I knew that it was time to start really wrapping my mind around what it meant to come back and preach after being away so long, and it's a little overwhelming, to be honest with you. But I got these cues starting in early December that it was time to start really thinking about it, because I was having the dreams, the minister dreams, the sermon anxiety minister dreams. These are like the ones where you forgot your homework or showed up to school without any clothes on except your robe went missing, or nobody told you you were preaching on that Sunday morning and you should have something ready in 5 minutes. Those are the kinds of dreams. And so I thought, okay, it's time to start paying attention. I knew I was coming back to preach on a topic that I figure most people already know the answer to. We probably should be listening to each other more often than we are. But my son gave me an illustration in early December that was the kind that a Zen master does with a stick on your hands or your head when you need to pay attention. The one that requires your attention through a little pain. I was doing a family wedding outside of Blanco, Texas, and we were getting ready in the hotel room beforehand, and it was just me and Hank, and we were getting ready, and I needed to get my materials prepped and my shirts ironed and myself all clean and together, and it was nap time, and the wedding was starting in just a couple of hours, and so he was very sleepy and needed to immediately take a nap, or at least that's what I told him. You're very tired. And I put a little pack and play. He's two and a half. I put a little pack and play and shoved it in a closet to try and make like a cave with sheets strewn around and clipped up to block out any of the light, and told him, you're getting very sleepy. You're very tired. It's nap time. And I would go and lock myself in the bathroom to prepare for this wedding, and I would hear him go, Daddy. And walk back out, and he would say, I'm not tired. Yes, you are. You're very tired, and you're going to take a nap, so we're going to get the sheets ready, and I would walk away, and then, Daddy, I would walk back out, and the same thing over and over again. I'm not tired. Yes, you are. I'm not tired. Yes, you are. And that frustration that, if you've ever had a 2.5-year-old, you understand, just kept ramping up, and eventually I heard him say, Daddy. I said, what? I'm not tired. I said, okay, you're not tired. You don't have to sleep, but I'm going to give you some books and toys, and you've got to do something while I get ready. Daddy. I walked over and he said, come closer. I said, okay. And he said, thank you for listening to my words. Yeah, I know. It was like that, oh, how dare you do that to me moment, Like, oh, the knife just... Here I am, I'm getting ready to go pontificate on love and relationships, and I can't even listen to my own kid. And it was a moment in which both I was kind of hit over the hand with the Zen stick because he required me to pay attention to him, but I think the reason that it hit me so hard and the reason why it was difficult for me to engage with him in that moment is because he was being as obvious as he could that from our youngest years, knowing that a source of for this 2-year-old, I'm giant and powerful and a source of love and attention. And for him, knowing that source of attention and love on the other end of the relationship, that you're seen and heard and known, is just profoundly important. And he was requiring me to understand that. I was shocked that even a 2.5-year-old could articulate, this is not working. Thank you for listening to my words. That's a little bit like what I experienced from that reading from the teacher Uriah Mountain Dreamer in our first reading this morning. Here she is. She's this spiritual teacher who does workshops and meditation classes, and she's just led this meditation retreat where she's probably said a lot of very wise, important things. And then she is unable to witness human suffering in front of her until she's required by this shaking, trembling, scared person. And she has the reaction to this woman that I, quite honestly, have had before. Oh, she doesn't want to do the hard work because she's being lazy. Or she doesn't really get what these spiritual disciplines are about. Or she's being a consumer of religion, or not taking this seriously, or 1,000 other things, except for the realization that this person is in pain. And her response is much like one that religious leaders fall into all the time. Well, if you would just listen to something I have to say, you would probably have a better understanding of this. And she offers that. Let me give you some advice on meditation. Until the woman grabs her by the arms and says, what I really want to know is if this is going to help me know God. And what I thought was so amazing is that this woman who doesn't know if she's going to make it through the days or weeks or years, equates knowing God with being heard. She almost says it like a run-on sentence. She says, if I do this meditation, will I know God? Is someone listening? Is somebody out there with me? To know God and be known by God for her was to be heard in the midst of her pain. Now, our Christian counterparts this morning, many of them, not all, but many of them are reading stories from the lectionary, a scheduled calendar of readings. And one of the readings that they're reading today is the story of the baptism of Jesus. It's one of my favorite stories from the Christian scriptures. It marks the beginning of Jesus' adult ministry in the world. He's about 30 years old, and he goes down to the river where John the Baptist is baptizing people. Some of you know this story. I think that Reverend Cantor mentioned it in Advent and showed a picture of John the Baptist, the wild-eyed, huge beard, hair shirt, eating locusts and honey in the wilderness. And I think a lot of people thought that's what I was going to look like when I came back from sabbatical. I must have had 85 conversations about why I don't have a beard. But I love this because it's straight out of a movie. There's this river setting, and all these people are coming down to reorder their lives. And it says that when the teacher Jesus is baptized, he's baptized in the same way I was as a teenager. He goes all the way under the water, and he comes up, and just like in the movies, the sky parts. It says the Spirit descends from the heavens, and it says he hears this voice. He's the only one who hears it. That says, you are my child, beloved, in whom I'm well pleased. I always found that really interesting, even growing up as a kid. I always thought, why would Jesus need to be baptized? It didn't make any sense to me. Why would this person who was either on the one hand of your understanding a very wise spiritual teacher or on the other literally fully human and fully God need this moment? And why would it be so important to the God-man that somebody on the other end said, child of God, beloved, in you I'm well pleased? I always thought, growing up in the Christian tradition, that if even the teacher Jesus needed that moment, the rest of us did. And I see in those stories a pattern that whether you're my 2.5-year-old in a sheet cave in a hotel in Blanco, Texas, Or this woman who on the surface can appear so frantic and annoying in this adult spirituality class, or this wise spiritual teacher. The fact that knowing that somebody in the other end of the relationship sees you, hears you, knows you as whole is profoundly important. I think one of the ways that we participate in letting people know that is by saying very little. Our Universalist ancestors, they believed that God had healed and saved and loved all of creation, and you could do nothing about it. You could not refuse the love of God no matter what you did. It was as if God was saying to each and every human being what Jesus heard out of the water: "Child of God, beloved, in you I am well pleased." And that line of thinking developed very quickly into the notion that it's not enough to think that God heals, God saves, God loves all, but that in our modern Unitarian Universalism, if we discover something that heals human lives, we are then immediately invited to play a role in that healing process. We cooperate with the holy in the act of healing the world. Once we discover that something heals humanity, we get an invitation that says, "So how would you like to help?" For me, compassionate listening is one of those healing realities. And I know you already know this. You probably wouldn't be gathering for worship in a congregation unless you knew the value of something like this. But I think it heals in a sense because it's almost like we're mirroring back to people the kind of God that the Universalists believed in, a God that didn't need your explanation or repayment or judgment or criticism or an argument or a debate, didn't need any of those things to recognize your humanity, to love you in the midst of your humanity. But I know how tempting it is to, instead of stop when I see somebody's pain, to want to go running away from it by explaining it away, by talking a lot, by giving explanations of how they could have avoided said pain, how I dealt with that in the past. A million other things, but stopping and saying, "There's pain. Child of God, beloved, in you I'm well pleased." I think that we each get to take on that voice of the holy. But paradoxically, we do it by saying very little, by getting out of the way of our relationships with each other and acknowledging that you don't have to explain your pain to me for it to be real. It sounds like a simple idea, but it's something I know I struggle with repeatedly. And I wondered a lot about that this fall, because I think that this kind of listening and being okay with the fact that I can't understand another person's pain is not just an interpersonal issue. I think it's a justice issue. I wasn't in the congregation with you when I know many of you were probably thinking and talking about the events in the fall where so many people of color were struggling with their fear in the face of police officers, and police officers were struggling, and there was this conversation in our country about what it meant to be black and whose lives were at stake, and all sorts of really heartbreaking, I know, polarizing issues. But one thing I noticed when I was watching the news and all of that was that it seemed like everybody, and I'll admit to a little of this myself, instead of wanting to acknowledge that there was real pain and human suffering involved in these moments, wanted to quickly explain it away. Instead of listening and saying, "There's pain here, child of God, beloved, in you I'm well pleased," I heard commentators say, "Well, he wouldn't have died if he weren't overweight." I heard people say, "Well, that wouldn't have happened to your son or your daughter if they hadn't done X, Y, or Z." I heard people say, "The pain of your community doesn't matter because of the way you all responded." I heard these kind of things said on television and the newspapers over and over, and I felt this lack of awareness that no one was saying, "Wow, there's some human suffering happening here." There's real fear. There is real anger. There is real torment. And I wondered how different our conversations as a culture would have looked if we had started by saying, it sounds like there's a tremendous amount of pain here. Tell us more. The idea that our conversations or our justice issues are predicated on winning an argument gets in the way of a lot of that. That story that Francis read this morning came from a very real one. Reverend Cantor adapted it from not a fictional story, a very real account of a man who had been a guard in a prison camp in a war, and his entire faith in humanity was on the line, and himself because of the things he had done. And it didn't make those events go away. But it did provide this moment of grace to be heard before being explained away. And I have to tell you, I was so glad coming back into the congregation over the last week for a number of reasons. Grateful not just because it's my church community or my job, but because I'm seeing with fresh eyes again how powerful the work is that we're doing. I think when you're mired in it, you see the good things and the challenges all at once, but I'm coming back and being able to see all the good that's happening here in some really profound ways. And I'll tell you that even though the break was necessary and good, Kate and I were ready to come back after some months. And even on Christmas Eve, we were sitting in the house and recognizing that this may be the only Christmas Eve that I'll ever be home all night with our kids. And at the same time, she said, wouldn't it be nice to be at church? And we were imagining 1,000 people sitting in the midst of the cold and the dark days, holding a light, bearing witness to hope in the world. And we're glad because we came back and saw this room last Sunday and knew that this stuff is not saccharine, it's not superficial, it doesn't get dismissed easily as some kind of Hallmark card wisdom. The kind of things that we're practicing in this place are very real and change lives. And I know that this attentive listening to one another is being practiced all over the congregation. In pastoral care meetings, and in our circle small groups, and in the listening conversations that I would encourage you to attend after the service. I guarantee you that somewhere in a line cooking food at a teenager's brunch to raise money for the youth program, 2 parents are engaging in important listening about how scared they are about one of their children or their marriage. I can guarantee you that somebody in a circles program is bearing witness to the fact that they're unsure, like the lady in the reading, whether they can make it through the months or years. That after this service, somebody's going out to the parking lot and will be talking to their friend and say, how are you doing? And they'll say, I'm dead scared. And that hopefully that person will sit with that for a minute. This is all very real. We're invited to take place in the healing of the world, conversation by conversation. Like the opening hymn says, to turn every casual corner into a shrine. When we discover that something heals in our faith, we are immediately invited to participate in that reality. So I invite you to listen with the heart to your friends, and family, and partners, and children, and members, knowing that bit by bit it does help to heal and create another corner of the beloved community on earth. May it be so. Amen.